for us. Michael, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us. The lockdown is across the whole country. We've been told that at some point certain levels will be different in different areas, but at the moment we're all on number 4, and it doesn't seem to make sense if you consider that there are very clear hotspots.
Yeah, absolutely, Sally. In fact, we did see some inkling as to where the Health Minister might be going. William Mkhize, in fact, tweeting earlier in the week that perhaps certain metros might have to tighten their regulations. So that would imply perhaps that we could see a different approach to certain areas and perhaps even to certain provinces. But let's focus on the battle lines that have started to emerge over the last 6 or 7 weeks since we've been under the lockdown itself. And I'm going to focus very quickly, Sally, on the Western Cape, because this really has become a hotspot in terms of South Africa's pandemic. The Health Minister is saying earlier today that the Western Cape now accounts for 53% of all coronavirus cases across the country. But here's the catch, Sally. The Western Cape makes up just 12% of South Africa's entire population. What could be affecting these numbers to some extent is the amount of tests that have happened in the Western Cape, Sally. So around about 25 to 27% of all the tests across South Africa have actually come from the Western Cape. So that might be affecting these numbers slightly, but still, William Mkhize is saying that he is very, very concerned about the Western Cape. Let's focus quickly on our next graphic, and we'll give you a sense of some of the problem areas, Sally. I want us to focus on the blue as well as the red. So the blue indicates the percentage of coronavirus cases as a proportion of the entire country, and the red, Sally, represents the percentage of the population. So as I mentioned, the Western Cape making up 12% of South Africa's population, but look at that blue bar, Sally, almost 53% of coronavirus cases. Gauteng not doing too badly. Around about 18% of all coronavirus cases come from Gauteng, but it makes up 26% of the country's entire population. Perhaps the alarm bells are ringing in the Eastern Cape, Sally. If we take a look at the Eastern Cape, it makes up about 11% of South Africa's entire population, but 13% of the coronavirus cases. And we have seen a lot of new cases, Sally, new infections in that particular province.
Of course, of those 4, they've all got metros, but the Eastern Cape certainly seems to be the one with the most rural areas. But it does have Buffalo City, which we know is a hot spot, and of course Port Elizabeth as well. But what about the provinces that are more rural? Yeah,
let's focus very quickly on that. We're calling it the fringe side of this battle, but of course each and every province is important in the fight against coronavirus. I mentioned the blue and the red, so let's stick to that theme, Sally. Take a look at the Free State, for example. It makes up a 1.4% of COVID-19 cases, but 5% of the population. So certainly the Free State not doing too bad. Limpopo is a good example as well, Sally. Just 0.5% of total COVID-19 cases, but it makes up 10% of South Africa's population. So certainly it would seem Limpopo doing relatively well. And if we focus very quickly on our next graphic, Sally, we did the maths and we calculated that these 5 provinces account for about 3% of total cases, and yet they make up 32% of South Africa's entire population. So in other words, almost a third of the entire population. So we are getting a very clear sense that this pandemic is centered around a few select provinces and to some extent a few select metros as well. And you get that sense as well when you look at the new cases. The Health Minister releasing those figures just a few hours ago. Let's bring that up very quickly. These are the new cases for the 11th of May, Sally, and you'll see that the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape making up the vast majority. So the Western Cape just over 450, the Eastern Cape nearly 140, and that means together, Sally, they make up 93% of new infections. Little wonder that William Mkhize has spent so much time over the last few days in the Western Cape and the Eastern Cape.
93% of new infections, not all infections.
Absolutely. So those are new infections as registered for the 11th of May.
But it does indicate that that's where either where testing has been ramped up or where the virus is specifically growing right now, the hotspots that we keep looking for.
Absolutely. It could well be a combination of a big program in terms of screening and testing, as well as a rapid spread of the virus, quite possibly a combination of both.
Well, thank you very much. Very interesting information there. That is Michael Marillier, crunching the numbers on the infections.